This conference is about me releasing publicly a submission that we have sent earlier this morning to the Commissioner for the public inquiry. And the reason why we have done that is because, like I'm sure most of you, to a lot of the transcripts, and in the transcripts there was a number of, I'll call, misinterpretations or inaccuracies. So we've taken the opportunity to make sure on the public record that the correct figures, numbers and information is available to the Commissioner to make sure it's on the public record. I've also made the decision to release all of this information to the community at the same time. The reason why we've drawn a timeline, which you can see in the first 2 pages attached to the release, and you've got all the attachments will come electronically to yourselves with the media release, so you should have probably received those now. But the reason why we've done timelines, it's not to get sympathy, but it's to demonstrate the high degree of difficulty the organisation had to face when the government made the decision right at the beginning that this had to be sorted out by commercial solutions, which means we had to resort to going to the banks. In a receivership or a large company going into administration, it's generally an issue between the board and the management and either the banks or the shareholders or a third party who may be involved in a takeover. They're the only people involved, whether it's a small or large entity. In our situation, we had to deal with not just the banks, we had to deal with IPART, we had to deal with the Office of Local Government, we have to deal with DPI, we have to deal with New South Wales Audit, we have to deal from politicians from all sides against what we were doing, and the media and the community, rightfully, up in arms about what had happened. That is unprecedented in the way things occur. The timeline is to demonstrate what we went through. I can say it starts in October with the decisions of the Council, or lack of, and the Commissioner's job is to look backwards at what happened. This looks forward of how we managed it. On my third day here, I received a demand from the bank, which you'll see. There's a number of things blacked out for confidential reasons, but nonetheless, you will get the gist of the pressure that we received, I think it was day 3 in the bank, from the bank. They sought to withdraw $107 million of loan portfolio that we had because the state government had not realised that by placing the organisation effectively into receivership, and you'll note those words in the bank's letter, they think we were in receivership. The state government had not realised that by a change of management actually breached the terms and conditions of that loan. So therefore we were facing that issue. From our cash flow, our initial cash flow forecasts, and I was extremely fortunate as the acting CEO to have Natalia Cowley join the organisation. She was there 4 days before me. And we were able to roughly project our cash flows out. We knew we were probably having to source in the vicinity of a new funding of about $150 million. So in that first week, we were facing the fact that one bank was looking to take away $107 million, and we were having to find, assuming we caught that or kept that, a further $150 million. So you can see that from that just initial scenario, the pressure was on. It took over 3 weeks with a lot of legal wrangling to actually secure that demand in our favour. We had to go out to our creditors and our staff and advise them that we would be unable to pay the creditors on the due time and that we would be delaying payment. That causes problems for our staff who deal directly with some of the small businesses out there. So our finance team was handling hundreds of calls from suppliers and so on, concerned about the fact that we were going broke, or had gone broke, and when were they going to get paid. We got $6.4 million from the state government, which was allowed us to pay the staff. The annual wage bill at that time, the weekly wage bill at that time was approximately $4 million. So you can see there wasn't a lot left over for creditors. The CFO, from her banking background, was able to approach one of the banks that we didn't have any loans with, and I'm not sure how, but she remarkably was able to achieve a $50 million loan without particularly any strings attached. We received that loan on the 17th of November, which enabled us to then be able to pay creditors and staff. I might add, in that period, we had the person who looks after the superannuation payments in the organisation saying there was not sufficient cash to pay the superannuation bill. The CFO and myself were busy producing our long-term financial plans, because both Natalia and myself both come from the private sector. Natalia's major background is one of the big four accounting firms. She's experienced in handling, working in a receivership area. Me coming from the commercial background as well, I have been through a receivership. I was the CEO of an organisation, went through it. I believe the government was lucky that you had two people here who understood what needed to be done and how fast it needed to be done. So we got the LTFP together. We put together a business package to talk to the other banks to try and secure our cash flow for going forward. We didn't, out of the major banks and the councils in New South Wales are only allowed to do with major banks. 3 out of the 4 refused to talk to us. 1 said they were prepared to listen. We took our business case to them. It's at the beginning of December, as you'll see on the timelines. They actually said that they were interested, and we put our business case. The business case that we put to them was, as you well know, reduce costs by approximately $70 million inside the organisation, to reduce the capital expenditure, which I had already done. So we reduced it from the 240 odd, we reduced it down to, I think, about 170 odd. In actual fact, we actually only delivered about 150, but that's beside the point. So we did that, and we needed to get revenue. We could not get the long-term financial plan to balance unless we received revenue. So the revenue had to come from an IPART application for a permanent 15% rate increase. Also, we were reliant on getting money back in the water and sewer determination, because as you're aware, at the moment, water and sewer is losing money, and it is the general rate that props that up, a situation which has to change. We also said we were going to sell $60 million worth of assets. We would unwind from the internally restricted reserves, which requires a council resolution, which was done. We unwound $20 million, which effectively reduced the debt by $20 odd million. And as I said, we had to go for the rate increases. We progressed this loan through. We had a meeting with what's called the risk component of that bank. The risk team comprised of 8 people. Natalia and I had 6 people from the risk, from this major bank, right across Australia on a Teams meeting, quizzing us for a couple of hours about our business plan to go forward. Now, this is different. No council goes through that risk management process. Generally speaking, banks have fallen over themselves to lend to councils. Quote, councils have the power to tax, therefore a bank has nothing to fear. And that's what I was told, in actual fact, the day before I started up here back in November. the government made that decision we would go down the commercial routes because, you, in their words, you're a safe bet to the banks. Well, that proved to be totally incorrect. Because when we started those discussions with the final bank, I think that's Bank Z, XYZ, yep, that's right, Bank Z in the timeline. As I said, we met with their risk team. The risk team were not convinced at that point in time. We actually refined our plans. We had actually by then started to achieve things, and that was critical. And that's where the idea, if you hadn't had things happening, the bank wouldn't have even entertained it. But Natalia and my experience was we knew we had to have wins on the board before we could go and get the bank. Otherwise they don't believe you can do the job. Completely contrary to what Professor Sampson said, where a financial controller with the council and with the management could have sorted this out. No chance whatsoever. We get through to the 15th, which is when that meeting, I think was one of the last meetings, was within the risk group. And we cut through to the 17th. On the 17th, which is the Thursday before Christmas, we were informed that there was no way risk was going to sign this off without having what the bank referred to as a letter of guarantee from the state government. We had been talking to the government, state government, about that particular thing, because Natalia and I had anticipated that for some weeks beforehand. And we were continuously told, you find the commercial solutions, you're a good bet, the banks will lend to you. We cut through to the 18th. The bank informs us that their risk team goes on leave at 4 o'clock Friday before Christmas. At 11 o'clock, I had been unable to talk to or raise the minister or the head of local government. And I was faced with a decision. Do I close the doors and advise creditors and staff that we would not be able to pay wages and or creditors from January 1 onwards? I ended up phoning Rob Stokes, who I know from my days at Warringah Council, know him well. I happened to have his private mobile number. Amazingly, he answered the call, explained the problem. He said he'd get onto it. By 2:38 that afternoon, we had the signed letter or statement of support, as the government called it, which I have attached. And at 3 p.m. that day, the administrator then, which was Dick Person, approved the loan, and we got the drawdown. I just want you to think about the pressure an organisation was under throughout that period. You will see lined up in there, we were dealing with myriads of questions from Audit New South Wales at that time. IPART did give us permission to do a truncated process for the 15%. We then switched through into the new year, and of course during that period I'd had to deal with the unions, negotiate all of this package and all the deals through with the unions. I was, as were other people here, meeting with staff and unions every week to keep them appraised of how we were going. And as you know, yourselves and the community was attacking the hell out of us. And it was very hard. We had a lot of people who couldn't take the pressure, and they were ill and they were sick. And that's why I'm making the statements in this today, is that the state government agencies need to think about working together and not leaving an entity, large entity like this, to a pack of wolves out there and hoping that they'll survive. We have, but it's only because of the bloody determination of people like myself, the CFO, and the new CEO who's come in, David Farmer. So if we go forward to the new year, the year we're in now, you will see the timeline continues right through till last month. During this period was obviously intense negotiations and discussions with staff and unions, because as we were downsizing by approximately 690 positions, but there had been a lot of people leave during the earlier periods. As I said, some couldn't stand the heat, and we only had about 300 people left to actually finally make redundant, which we've largely got through voluntary redundancies which was a good thing. So we progressed on from that. IPART, we put our application into IPART, so we'd had a 2-week period to get something together for IPART, which we did. We put it out there. We requested from IPART. We requested from IPART. We requested from IPART a permanent rate increase of 15% to match the agreement and contracts with the bank. It appears IPART took no notice of those commitments and gave us 3 years, which of course puts us in breach again. We complete, so that's why I turned around and I resolved we have to apply to IPART again. And IPART's current view, you're not supposed to come back until the end of the 3 years. It staggers me. What part don't they understand that our funding depends on us having a revenue stream to be able to repay things? Hence, there is only one option down the track. That is, we have to cut costs by a further 26 million, which is the amount of the 15% increase we got. We have already in productivity gains, contrary to Mr. Kevin Brooks out there's views. If we just look at the corporate services area, we took 187 people, approximately $18 million out of corporate services, which is a reduction of over 50% of the entire corporate services group. Now that doesn't impact on the community one iota. Now if that's not a productivity gain of massive order, I don't know what is. On top of that, you'll find an attachment here, which talks about the productivity gains we've got apart from that. We've made some massive productivity gains in other areas, which we will continue to make. As I've said, the misinformation that's out there is causing immense damage to this organisation. We're in a situation now where we've had ads out running for quite senior managerial roles here. We have not had one response. We can't recruit, people are leaving. All because the threat is there that we're going to have to cut costs, which means a further 200 odd staff probably having to go. I said right from day one to IPART and to all this, I need certainty. No commercial entity that goes through a receivership suffers this. I can't get appointments with ministers or senior people in state government. I represent now 350,000 people. I'm the only representative. I have not been able to get meetings to be able to explain the situation.
Who are you looking at meetings with?
So I'll just finish this. So at this point in time, we get to this stage. We completed everything we said we were going to do by June 30th, close of play for the last financial year. Everything. Everything the council was asked to do, we have done. We have downsized it. We've sold the assets. We requested the extra monies, both from IPART on water and sewer and on the continuation of the current rate structure for the general rate. We've done everything we can. You look at our trading history, it's been out reporting monthly, and you will see after the first quarter, at the end of September, we are trading profitably. I now need to make sure that the long-term financial plan, which is over the 10 years, has that extra revenue line in it, and that is given to us by IPART. If it's not, then we will unfortunately have to cut costs further. The idea in a recent article that it was an amazing find that we were putting more staff on when we got more money is just symptomatic of some of the thinking that has gone on, that if we put people off, why we suddenly have to re-employ. The reason is simple. Like any entity out there, the bank says you have to live within your means. I have to budget on living within my current means. I cannot assume, which is exactly the problem the last council made, and they assumed they would get themselves out of the mess. In a real world, you can't do that. Private sector can't do that. And the way the government put us into this situation meant it was effectively a private sector type recovery. So it is a very simple principle. You have to live within your means. If you get more money, then you can spend more money, which is absolutely the intention with water and sewer. We hope to get more money so we can recover the lack of the fact that there hasn't been investment to the tune of $120 million, which is what IPART removed from this council 3 years ago. So right now we're trading profitably, we're looking good, but I think you will follow in the information we've provided to you. You will see throughout that we've met what we said we were going to do. The degree of difficulty the organisation has been under in having to perform through this whole period. And I'm going to leave it by saying it's over to people like yourself and the community that are going to determine what happens in the future. I can only make financial decisions in here with what I can see in front of me. And until I see the community starting to support the fact we need more money, or they can choose to have far less service, it's a clear choice now for the community. It's a clear choice for yourselves and to how you present now to the community. As I said, the organisation has done everything it can to get itself out of this situation. It has been, and I'll use the words fighting, every bloody government agency, local politicians, the media, and the community. And I can understand why people are angry, absolutely. But the difficulty is, we have to look forward. And that's why I've taken this opportunity to produce, coincides with me being here exactly 12 months. So you could call it my 12-monthly report if you like, which demonstrates what we've done since the crisis came upon us, how we've managed it, what we've achieved, and how the staff are feeling right now. It's a pretty sad and sorry organisation to be in. We can't attract staff. We're losing staff. Until we get a break, the thing's going to continue to go downhill. So, my choice to bring that up. There's 8 recommendations there. I'm happy to sort of go through them. Some of them are not related quite to this. There's a couple of suggestions there that, but you'll see it is about government agencies working together, talking together, and recognising the organisation's in financial trouble. I, in fact, don't have a particular problem with being asked to go down the commercial route, because my own opinion is absolutely there is no way that under a council and the then leadership of the organisation would have been able to balance the costs and the revenue. Certainly not in the 7 weeks we had from the day I started to Christmas. So with that, I'm happy to open it up for any questions you might have.
Rik, has the state government appreciated now the seriousness of the situation that you're in?
No. No.
You feel like the state government's left council in the lurch?
I think that's the feeling we have. It's like no one wants to know us, and I think the issue is, as I say in the thing there, they're bureaucrats. I don't believe anyone in any of those entities, including IPART, has ever been through a receivership and knows the stresses and strains it puts on an organisation. I'm not sure whether any of you have, but it puts the stresses and strains on an organisation like you wouldn't believe. So you have to think about the finance team here and those, which was cut by close to 30%, close to 30%. We didn't have any new technology or anything else. In the inquiry you heard that technology was a problem and all the rest. We used no new technology. Natalia and I just used exactly what was inside the organisation now. There hasn't been any additions or changes or anything. It was all there. You just had to have people who had courage and knowledge to achieve what needed to be done.
In terms of the state government, maybe not so much IPART, but do you think that politics has played a part here?
Absolutely. Yep.
Can you expand on that?
Yep. Right from the day it was announced, and when we first announced we needed the revenue side, both sides of politics said they were against a rate increase. Now, they were saying, I don't know where they thought the money was going to come from, but they said they were against the rate increase, and they continue to lobby that. I think I can recall maybe the Liberal member with a full-page ad somewhere, I think it was, saying vote against the rate increase. These things are just not helpful when you're in this sort of situation. And when the staff see these things, you just got to have them imagine you're sitting inside this organisation, and we've still got 1,900 staff, even today. So we're well down on the 2.5, which we had at one stage. So those people, and their productivity, of course, no one, when they go home at night, COVID around, everything else, nobody, they couldn't even talk to their mates easily. We have people very sick, heart attacks and so on, from stress.
It seems that IPART is playing a pivotal role in this organisation. Do you think it has been politicised? And can you understand the decision of IPART to reduce the costs in 2019, the water rates?
I don't believe for one moment IPART is politicised. The comment I would make about them is, as I said, I'm not sure they took into consideration. In terms of the water and sewer application, there's no question the council previously put a poor application in. Absolutely no question about that. Now, I think it's questionable as to whether the response from IPART was the right one, because ripping $120 million out, which can't be replaced, is that the right solution? Or was there other options for IPART to penalise the council for a poor application? Those are the things I can't comment on in a sense because I just don't know. But I do think the thinking has to change a bit in there, because we very clearly, and it was Dick Person who sent a letter to IPART for supporting our SRV of 15%, clearly explaining the requirements from the bank and everything else. And we put a long-term financial plan in there clearly showing the impact if it was removed. And their wisdom was they'll give us 3 years. And I said, right now, they're saying, well, the instrument they gave us, they're now trying to find how do they legally change it. Because they're saying to us right now, well, we actually can't do what you want because you're supposed to come back in 3 years' time.
On that, you're technically therefore in breach of those loan regulations.
Correct.
How does the financier feel about that?
At the moment, they're okay because we're applying. If we don't get it, that's when the problem arises, because we have to refinance close to $100 million by the end of next year. And that's why we have to go early, because we have to have a trading history. It's just like any of yourselves when you apply to the bank. You have to demonstrate you've got an income. You have to demonstrate how much you spend. We have to be able to demonstrate that, not promise. Demonstrate, which means doing it. That means we have to have done it before we apply for the loan.
Now, 1 year ago, we interviewed Dick Person on the situation, and we asked why Treasury, that is to say, Treasury Court, could not fund your loan requirements. Are you still of the same opinion that that's simply just something that they don't do?
I am of that same opinion, and the reason why, you'll note in the recommendations I'm suggesting that we look at the Queensland Treasury model, which we call them QT. In Queensland, QT are the sole provider of finance to local government. And it's at attractive business rates. It lends on at the same rate that the state gets. So that would be extremely beneficial alone just for councils. But they also provide on an annual basis what I call a banker's cheque or review of the organisation. Something that banks lending to councils here in New South Wales haven't done, and you'll see that's another recommendation. The banks need to sharpen their game and not just hand out money. They need to actually check that the organisation is being run correctly and properly, just as they would for any other business. So yes, I agree that T Corp here could provide that role, exactly like that, and in fact I'm recommending that.
But if you go with recommendation 6, that funds aren't restricted, could you then pay yourself out of restricted funds?
Well, you can never pay yourself in that sense, but because what would happen, as per Queensland again, one of the difficulties we had here was this misunderstanding and lack of understanding by everybody, and I include everybody, of what matters with restricted funds. You even had this ridiculous situation of New South Wales Audit arguing with ourselves over that. To which, when you see the legal opinion, they're all attached, you'll see the legal opinions. And it's interesting, Clayton Utz's legal opinion, after seeing the Crown Solicitor's advice to New South Wales Audit, actually says there is no need to change the Act because it is quite clear under the current legislation that it should be done the way we, Natalia and I, had called it a prior period error.
So that means you could use the restricted funds to pay your bank loan?
No. What you're saying, what it says is that if the Queensland model is very simple. It just says, like New Zealand as well, it just says we don't have that artificial separation. Developer contributions, Queensland has as a separate entity. They say you should keep that separate because that is to go for future infrastructure. I think that's not a bad idea. Well, in fact, I think that's a good idea. But everything else, why do you keep it? If we take the waste fund, for example, the council should know that they have to remediate a landfill, not set up in a bank amount of money to keep for that. Because the council may well know the remediation of the landfill is not going to take place for 5 years, 10 years. So why hold money sitting there for that length of time which can't be used for something else? And you can always, when you come to that situation, if you're keeping your prudential limits in sync, then you go along and you borrow. That's when you use debt to pay some of these things. So it's a different style of management. And I think if you did that, then incoming councillors and mayors and senior staff would understand things a lot better if they knew what they were dealing with. And the amount of money they've got in the bank is the amount of money they can use.
So if you weren't going to use restricted funds to pay your debt and the restricted funds become unrestricted, what are you going to do with that money?
Well, the simple thing, Marilyn, is that the environment we're talking about, you change over to another environment. You're trying to talk into what would we do tomorrow? We have repaid the externally restricted funds. They're already paid back. And as you will see in our updates on a monthly basis, from a cash flow perspective, we're pretty much got ourselves back on top with cash. I predict within 18 months we will actually have restored our cash position, which means we have restored the...
But also you show us every month that we've got millions of dollars in investment.
Yeah, those are in the current funds. What we've done is we've put the money back and they're invested. It has to be there because at the moment under the Local Government Act we have to keep it all separate. So whether that's water, sewer, waste, Section 711, all the rest, all this has to be kept separate, which is what we're doing. So all the externally restricted got repaid out of the $100 million loan, plus it provided the money for our cash flow going forward to keep paying creditors and everything else. After that runs out, we have to have the organisation running at a surplus profit, which goes towards the loan repayments. You'll also note in there that we have a current backlog of $240 odd million of infrastructure, which is I get reminded of from time to time. Harvey Bay people, which we were out at a public meeting, Cass and I, earlier this week, and they pointed out how bad things were around the place, and all I can do is agree. But that's because you've got a $240 million backlog, which both the two previous councils produced, not this council. This council's kept it the same, it hasn't improved it, and as I say in my notes, that is a problem for another day. I can't do that as well as recover the thing from the financial thing. That's for a future council to decide and to talk to the community about a potential rate increase down the track to start reducing that backlog. In other words, a bit more curb and gutter, a bit more other things to go in around the place.
So you just said that if restricted funds became unrestricted, it would be a whole new
What you would
system.
have in terms of your working capital or cash that's available to use, you'd have a bigger pile, yes. But you have to then plan carefully for when major events are going to occur. I'll just use the remediation of a landfill, which can cost you 20 mil, say. You have to know when those things are going to occur, and in your longer term financial planning, which is what any organisation, be it business or private, should be doing, public should be doing, is actually planning when they're going to do it and how they're going to fund it. You might choose to keep it in an internally restricted reserve, or you might choose to not do it and be paying other loans down, but I'll reborrow at that time to pay for it. Those are business type decisions, which is what a council, and most people are experienced in making. It becomes simple because you just got to remember, state and federal do not have the same sort of accounting processes as we do. They do not have to have separate buckets. That's right. And they don't include depreciation in their public accounting.
So you haven't done a recommendation on depreciation?
Yes, I have this there.
Which one is it?
I can't remember which one it is. I think it's about the government making sure that I can't remember which one it is. It's in there anyway. What it says, it might be more in the commentary, where we actually say that getting grants and inverted commas free money from state and Commonwealth without the operating side puts a burden on a council because it has to provide for the operating expenditure and the depreciation of that new asset.
And the maintenance.
And the operations side, you're running it. So that's why we did get an agreement, and I have to say that both the state and Commonwealth have been helpful in giving us grants which go toward what's called the renewal costs. So where we have a budget line for 175 million of capital in our overall budget, what is happening, instead of ratepayers' money having to go and be used there to refurb a surf club, for example, we can use a grant money to go in, which means that money we were going to spend dropped straight through to the bottom line, to the surplus, and that's one of the reasons why we're rebuilding cash, because it's cash at the bottom. We're rebuilding our cash reserves quite quickly, or quicker than anticipated.
So is this a new thing from the federal and state government, that they're saying yes, you can use it as maintenance?
No, they're not saying to use it as maintenance. What they're doing, so you take a typical situation where we've got on our renewal list, we say this surf club X needs a bit of new toilet blocks, a few other things around it, associated unisex toilets, whatever it might be, and some more amenities, whatever. But it's an existing building, it's an existing asset. It already has the depreciation attached to it, so it's already being funded. So instead of us having to find the money to renew it, the state does it, or the Commonwealth does it, and we don't have to spend that money on that. So that means we just, as I said, that money just technically just drops straight to the bottom line.
Because you had been putting that money aside?
Correct.
Okay.
So that's what's enabling us to build our stuff. So as I said, the way we're running the organisation now, and the way Mr Farmer's actually got it going, he's got good productivity gains happening. He's managing the cash position extremely well. And as I said, the trading position is we're trading within budget or ahead of budget after the first 3 months.
And on the big ticket item of the water and sewer entity, which is an anomaly for Central Coast Council, this seems to be, on any analysis, the big differentiator between yourselves and other councils.
Yep.
You have a $4 billion plus entity that you have to account for in dual legislation.
Correct.
How is the process of evaluating or corporatising that entity going?
Well, the issue, and I'll tell you what the issue is before we talk about corporatisation. The issue is you have a Water Management Act and you have a Local Government Act. As per the discussion that occurred over the use of restricted and unrestricted funds, they're different. Under the Water Management Act, for example, there's a number of things that you do which are not consistent with the Local Government Act. To give you a couple of examples, one, under the Water Management Act, so a Hunter Water Zone, they can borrow internally water to sewer, sewer to water. When we're under the Local Government Act, we can't do that. That's why we were refused when we asked if we could borrow from the 100+ million that was sitting in the sewer fund, could we use it? The answer was no from the Minister. So that's one difference. The second difference is, IPART, when they're calculating their charges and to what the council should be doing, if you take, and I'll take, say, a mythical pipeline, and say a state or Commonwealth gave $50 million to the council to build a new pipeline for water, say, under IPART's regulatory approach, and this applies to Sydney Water and Hunter Water, it's not just for us, under their approach, they can only claim depreciation on stuff that they've done. If it's a gift, inverted commas, they can't claim depreciation on it. But you go to the local government side, every asset we have to expense the depreciation on it. Mm-hmm. So it changes our stuff.
So you have two sets of accounts there, effectively, depreciation.
It's effectively what you do, and this is the problem, you see. However we structure an entity to deliver water and sewer, whether it's corporatised, it's a separate company, whatever, whilst we retain 100% ownership of it, or greater than 50%, we have to consolidate that into our total. Now, there's no question under consolidation that's reporting under the Local Government Act. Now, if we were to have 50% equity, then we can equity account for it, which means we've just got to show income and expenditure, but we don't get caught with all the depreciation side and all the rest. It actually runs a separate set of books, and we just take the outputs, if you like, from that, not the immediate detail in it. So that's one difference. So whether it's corporatised or not doesn't change that. It's the fact it's under the Water Management Act which is the defining difference. So if you corporatise it, yes, it's separate. But if we still own it, and I have to say I put the question up at at Kilcare the other night with about 30 people in the room, and I said, would you be happy if we sold the water and sewer business? Pretty much every hand went up no, which is my interpretation as to how the community would think. But that's the way they thought.
It was interesting
Just
last
a
night you
time.
changed the direction of the water and sewer, because in your submission to IPART you said we want to put all...
Yep. This is just another one of the things that IPART isn't thinking about what's happening inside this entity. It decided that it would go out for consultation, as it is at the moment, about switching from the under the Water Management Act, the drainage and component, and bring that back under the Local Government Act. We don't have a problem with that at all, because that's how most councils actually operate to deliver water and sewer charges. No problem with that at all. It's just the timing.
But also in your submission you wanted to go the other way.
No, we wanted to go, okay, so we're clear. IPART have said they would like to change how we recover the fees or the costs for drainage. Currently, it's via the water and sewer drainage bill, which is regulated by IPART. What they're suggesting is take it out of there and take it across to be funded by the general rate. The mechanism to do that is that we will have to go next year, assuming we're even successful this year of maintaining it, we will still have to go next year, if IPART says we have to, for another SRV.
But in your submission you said we want to put our stormwater people into the water
That's right.
group.
That's at the moment. So, Baron, what you must understand is we have to do what we need to do for today. These are things that may change. That if things change, then we adjust, or we anticipate beforehand. What we can't do is just sit here and say, well, the world's going to come right and this will all work out, because that's what got the council into the trouble in the first place. They thought, with the roll will survive COVID. We don't really have a problem here, all the rest. So what IPART haven't recognised is we will have to go straight from this year, when we're talking about an SRV and a water and sewer change, to next year having to talk about another probably 12% in that order rate increase, because that's the mechanism to take it out of there to there. Now you can imagine how the community's going to go. They're just we're never going to be able to explain it. And that's what we're saying. It's going to be so complex and so difficult for the community to understand this that they're just going to say, no, you're charging us more money. So that's what we're saying, is please delay it to the next determination, which will be hopefully 4 years' time for water and sewer. At that time, we will have put in place that mechanism to change it across. And that's what I resolved last night, to say, we will do that. Not it might be done, we will do that.
So does that mean those people that you're putting over into sewer now will come back into...
They'll go wherever, they will go wherever IPART decides they go.
It's such a lengthy submission reply, and it is responding to some things that other people in the inquiry have, referring to what
Yep.
people in the inquiry. Do you have faith that the Commissioner gets an idea of how much strain Council and yourself have been through? What is the point of this submission and reply? Are you trying to correct the record? Are you trying to push Council's position? What's your purpose for this lengthy submission and reply?
As I said at the beginning, it's not about getting sympathy, but it's about pointing out the degree of difficulty that we've had to incur in dealing with all of these agencies, with no coordination between them, each of them following their own policy agenda and setting, and treating us just like we're a piece of carrion sitting on here with hyenas pulling it that way and vultures attacking and everything else. It's just like there's a carcass here and they're just pulling us this way and all the rest.
So do you want to name those ones that won't meet with you, those departments?
I've basically effectively named.
Where have you named?
Dominello was one who I requested to meet with, and we didn't even get the courtesy of a response from him. His department responded saying the Minister doesn't get involved. I think it was words to that effect. I can't remember the exact words. But
Other departments as well? There's you named them somewhere in this, have you?
we did try to talk to Greg Piper, because he's on the committee that oversights Audit New South Wales, because, as I said in there, you've got to have an adjudicator. On what basis or what right does Audit New South Wales have, with flaky Crown advice, to qualify this organisation, which of course is our credit rating going down big time, when our legal advice from a top tier 1 law firm is unequivocal, even having seen the Crown advice, that we're right. So why did they have that right without a mediator in between to be able to say, well, because I made the call, because I could have challenged it in court, but what's the point of wasting ratepayers' funds and taxpayers' funds in a fight to solve an academic argument? There should have been an independent arbitrator who says, look, that's the way you go. We were happy with that, but there's no mechanism. That's what I want to say about, because you can't go and talk to these guys because they don't listen.
Is it a case that you're defending council's actions or just pointing out how hard it has been?
No, it's pointing out how hard it's been. I mean,
defending. No.
yeah, as I said, it's not about a sympathy vote. It's just pointing out that if you put the government made the choice that it was a commercial receivership effectively and it had to have a commercial solution. My view, as I've said in there, I don't believe they understood the consequences of that decision. So all the government entities have continued to play at the arm's length their policy positions, forgetting about that we, having now had to deal with banks and dance to their tune, because you'll note in there, and it's a very significant point to note, the bank did not secure against our future cash flow, which is what happens in every other situation when a bank lends to a council. They secure against the cash flow, so against the rates income. So they say, well, if you're not paying, we'll be deducting from your rates income. In our case, they weren't prepared to even do that. We want hard assets. So some of your assets out there at the moment are mortgaged to the bank.
Is there anything else there, Rik? We've just got to go.
Yeah, no, we've got to.
Yeah, we've got to go.
I've got to go.
Recommendation 8 is amazing.
Yes, I like that.
Well, that's something I floated at Kilcare, and they all put their hands up and said, what a great idea. So I thought, well, I'll float it.
How are you going to make that happen?
I can't. Government has to do that. But I actually think it would work. If you put 3 reputable people, now I don't know how you select them,
Right.
but if you put 3 reputable people and they had strong knowledge, financial, governance and maybe risk, and put them in there, at least the community could see if those people were arguing against it, that there was, there might be something wrong with an overall decision. So thank you guys. Thank you.